Good morning, folks. I'm here in Oakwood Cemetery, and today I want to talk about one of the more famous regiments of the Army of Northern Virginia, more specifically the 4th Texas, which otherwise are known as one of the regiments that composed of Hood's Texans. They were notable for being just extremely brave, gallant men who were able to do whatever Lee asked of them to do. Now, here at Oakwood Cemetery, if we go over here, we're in Section C. Now, Section C is where a large number of the men from Gaines Mill were buried during the war. Mainly the men who had gone to the hospitals here in Richmond and then eventually passed away and had to be, disposed of somewhere, which in the end ended up being over here. There are also a number of graves over in Section A and B, further along that way, that have some men from Gaines Mill, but the majority of them are buried over here in Section C. And in this case, the two graves that we're talking about are going to be just down here. Now, to give a little bit of a summary of the events leading up to these men being buried here, in 1861, after the secession of Texas and then the eventual start of the American Civil War, the 4th Texas was formed up as a volunteer regiment, and as a result, a large number of men from Texas, including in places such as Guadalupe County and elsewhere, ended up joining the regiment that was newly formed up. And eventually they were incorporated into the Army of Northern Virginia. In 1862, they would fight throughout most of Virginia, all the way up into to the gates of Richmond itself. Until eventually, on June 27th, 1862, they would fight in the 7 Days Campaign, specifically during the Battle of Gaines Mill, where a large number of men, including Albert Polk Brown here, would eventually be wounded and end up in the hospitals here in Richmond. Now, Albert Polk Brown was a part of Company A of the 4th Texas Regiment, and he was wounded in the leg during the battle, and eventually ended up in one of the major hospitals here in Richmond. If I recall correctly, it was Chimeriso Hospital. Now, what makes Albert Polk Brown unique among a lot of these men who are buried here is that we actually know what he looks like. There's a photo of him with his, I believe, one of his brothers that was taken in 1861, and we actually have the fortune of having that photo preserved to this day. And as you can see here, he was wounded at Gaines Mill and then survived for about a month or so afterwards, and most likely died from disease induced by his leg wound. And like many of the men who are buried here in Section C, a lot of them suffered from leg wounds of some degree, and then eventually they would induce some sort of disease from that leg injury, which would eventually result in their death. Usually something like gangrene, which was extremely common during the time. Now, to continue on with the 4th Texas, one of the major attributes that they had done during the battle was they had quite literally charged across Boatswain Creek and charged all the way up Turkey Hill to assault the Federal batteries in that position, which was near suicidal, but they actually managed to do it. Not only did they manage to do it, but they were able to successfully take the battery and also drive the Union forces away, effectively destroying their very well effective defensive position in the area. And as a result of that particular battle, the Texans earned a strong reputation as very brave, gallant men. And here's the other member of the 4th Texas. This is the grave of John T. Young, who was born in Guadalupe County, Texas, and sometime in the 1840s, I believe 1842, if this tombstone is to be proven correct. And eventually he was wounded at the Battle of Gaines Mill on June 27th, 1862 from a leg injury. And then was taken into Richmond throughout the next month, and eventually passed away, most likely from disease again induced from that leg injury, on August 5th, 1862. And he was a part of Company D, which was again one of those companies that ended up charging one of the batteries on Turkey Hill, the federal batteries, I should say. Now, what makes Young's grave quite interesting, even when compared to a lot of the others here, is that this is actually a fairly new stone. To the rear, there's an additional epitaph, which I'll read here for you. Sacred to the memory of John Toomer Young, 1842 to 1862. Tread lightly on the heroes that bled to halo our national story. Tread lightly on the dust of our dead. 'Tis the treasure paid for our glory. Guided by our loving God to the original stone, recreated from this same stone to honor our John with our love by his Texas family. As you can see here, even many years after the war, centuries after the war, those who were related to them came back to check on their loved ones. And it's important that we all do so. Even if we don't know where they're buried, it is important to understand and respect those who came before us, long before us even. Always pay respect to the dead, and also hold those that are close to you even closer than what you could ever imagine. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And I hope I was able to educate someone about the cemetery a little bit. So, have a wonderful day.